non-markets, but important regulatory and government affairs side.
Good morning, everyone. Patrick Krieger, Vice President of Sustainability at the Plastics Industry Association. If you're not familiar with us, we are the largest and only trade association in the United States that represents the full plastic supply chain, equipment, material, processors, and recyclers. I actually walked over the bridge from NPE Space Straw, where we're starting to pick booths for next year. The Plastics Industry Association works really hard to educate, advocate, and collaborate on behalf of the industry. We work to promote us, to protect us, and to work on growth. In the sustainability side, when I'm not working with companies to make sure that we are manufacturing our products more efficiently with things like water, energy, using recycled content, or eliminating plastic waste in the environment, either by preventing it from being there in the first place or encouraging collection and use. I work day in and day out on recycling, promoting a circular plastics economy, and often what that means is policy, because we definitely know we want to go to a place, and we're not there yet. Unlike some of the other associations, we don't have a specific number target for recycling goals. We would like for it to be more. It could be 8, it could be 80. I always want it to be more. But to Chaz's point, we want to make sure that anything that we talk about is attainable, that is realistic, that we can make sure that we're there. And also, I think it's very wise to think about having legislators try to bend the will of the market to their whims. Instead, we look at encouraging policy that makes sense and that is supporting ultimately the consumers and the business's goals, which makes sure that we are talking about science-based targets that are fact-based and that are also often material agnostic. So when we look at policy in this space, some of it is actually, again, material agnostic. You look at the Global Plastics Treaty and what that's actually going to mean with ripple effects to other kinds of materials, especially when we talk about import or export restrictions on the shipment of waste and the definition of what waste is. You look at things at the federal level, and while we're not necessarily concerned about things from Congress right now due to the balance in the current makeup, we are looking at regulations rather. So the big ones for us in the industry are the GSA single-use products or single-use plastics ban last year, which we don't anticipate seeing any final rules on, but we might see further discussions on. And then FTC green guides, right? And these are incredibly important because they're only reviewed every 10 years and they impact everybody in the room on what you can and cannot say about your products to your customers and to the rest of the market. We believe it and we think that it's true that the definition for recyclable is true for paper and it's the same as for plastics and glass. And at the state level, we are continuing to work on issues like extended producer and responsibility and return deposit schemes, bottle bills, those sorts of things. The reason being is because our industry and the brand commitments and everybody along the line wants to use more recycled plastic. And for us to do that, it's all about supply. How do we collect it? How do we incentivize? How do we change culture to make sure that people are not, as Chaz mentioned earlier, putting the wrong thing in the wrong bin as they are it's so easy to do for many of us. So I think that there is a cultural change, but there's also ideas around how we can employ smart technology in thinking about these things, whether they are smart labeling or smart sortation and things like that. So as an industry, we are focusing across all of those things, and we work with many of our members and many really smart people in the room. I read Chaz all the time to make sure that our recommendations are reasonable. So looking forward to the rest of our conversation today.
Thanks so much. I should have mentioned that unfortunately John Sheeran could not join us from the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association, so we're proceeding, of course, without John on the panel, unfortunately. As I mentioned at the outset, we would really like to have questions from the audience. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. We've got some folks with microphones, and we'll get them over to you.
Is that on now? Yeah. This question is for Patrick. I really appreciate what you're doing trying to move the industry forward. What is your organization doing to help move sustainability credentialing for fuels derived from plastics?
So fuels derived from plastics?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
right now they're not designated as a sustainable fuel product, so they don't meet any of the national incentivizations as a sustainable fuel. They don't meet the European RED II designations. So what is your organization doing to help push that so the industry can move better?
That's a great comment, and follow up with me afterwards, because I think that often when we talk about advanced recycling, it does get conflated with fuels and the fuel products that are made in that system. And we want to make sure that there is a pathway. We recognize that those are an important part of making recycled plastics through the advanced or molecular processes economical. And so we haven't been working there yet, but that is something that's really important. So I'd be happy to talk with you more and see what we could be doing.
Hi, my question is for Chaz, and you had listed a slide that had NERC's tracking, I think, of multiple different materials and the revenue or cost from MRFs specifically, and you listed residual costs as being a variable on that chart. I was hoping you could dive into, how big are those residual costs and what kind of impact they do have on those charts.
It varies by the quarter, and 10-15%, and it's simply the efficiency in cleaning up. Sometimes as high as 20%. We are going to be adding in the future just a line showing the ups and downs on those residual. We call them along with the processing costs. But there is no perfect collection system out there. There is always going to be contamination, so we just want to track that also, the cost of that. It changes every quarter. And I'm sorry, if you can give me your card, I can go back and I can check, but I don't have that data with me here. But it changes every quarter.
Okay, I'm going to try to bring data to an emotional argument. Curt, you had mentioned in your presentation, where is the plastic going to come from? If we look at tipping fees around the United States, Gulf Coast is $21 to $25 a ton. You get up into the Northeast, it's up to $150 to $160 a ton. How do we encourage the waste aggregators to not dig a hole and put it in it versus developing some infrastructure so that we can get the plastics? It's open to the panel versus specifically to Curt.
I think that the first battle we need to fight is internally, and we need MRFs to take a look at their economics, and we really need them to throw aside the traditional way of looking at it, where they come to the conclusion that they're not making money on glass. I mean, if they can throw that aside and look at the actual cost of recycling, they're going to find out they do pretty well on glass, and that will change the philosophy of encouraging more material to come into MRFs. Right now, a lot of times, MRFs are the ones that are out telling the cities there's no markets for glass. There are, or we're losing money on glass, and I totally disagree with that. And I did a study, and I sent it over to Waste Management, and I said, pick holes in this. Tell me where I'm wrong. And they came back and they said, Curt, you're right. And their philosophy has changed, and they're encouraging glass to come back in. Does tipping fees help? Absolutely. I mean, in the Northeast, tipping fees are a lot higher. We're taking glass now from the Northeast, loading in a rail car and shipping it down to North Carolina because the tipping fees kind of encourage that. But I don't think that needs to be the only answer.
So we're focusing on EPR, extended producer responsibility, and taxing at that end. Do you think maybe the taxes should be at the other end?
So sometimes we talk about what's within the realm of possible, and I would say that at the state and local level where tipping fees are set, there are very few constituencies, more powerful than waste and waste haulers. So I think it could be an effective tool, but I think it's one that has a very low likelihood of success. So instead, let's look at some areas where we actually can potentially also incentivize the market and also potentially have a policy vehicle that would be successful.
Yeah, the political downside of taxes on tipping fees, which I think is what you're sort of talking about, is local governments will end up paying a lot of those taxes, and they don't have the money for it. So they tend to very quietly oppose those at the state level because it becomes a cost to them. If you up their tipping fee by $10 a ton and you're a jurisdiction that landfills, say, 100,000 tons a year, that's serious money. And so they're going to say, wait a minute. So that's the problem politically.
This is Byron Liu with the Liam and Paper. I have two questions for Bill and the panel. The first is that you said the overcapacity. You have a very firm statement about that overcapacity, which I'm very happy to hear. What do you think about the global capacity? Is there any overcapacity issue globally? The second question related to the comments regarding more new capacities using recycled paper. Does that shift the perception about the American fiber's strengths?
So Byron, thanks for the question. So, you know, when you look at a global capacity or global demand for corrugated boxes, let's say, I think, you know, in the emerging countries, their growth is going to be stronger than the U.S. And they probably didn't have that pullback that we had in the second half of 22 as much, but it's, you know, strictly very dependent on economic growth. And you know, if in the emerging and frontier economies we get strong growth, the global demand for boxes will be up. And then we'll probably see exports of containerboard from the U.S. To your second question about, you know, recycled fiber use, one interesting thing about the global box production is wood fiber capacity coming into China. China is really replacing the imported recovered fiber that they did import prior to 2017 with wood projects. There's a good 10 to 15% capacity coming in wood, and also Southeast Asia containerboard production. I don't know if I got to your second question exactly. I mean, hone me in on that one.
Yeah, you got it right. But does that mean the U.S. The dependence on the U.S. fiber in the past because of the strength will change because China's input is more virgin now? Then would that change the perception?
Well, I think the change might be minor. I mean, we always need fresh fiber in the system to make corrugated boxes and to make containerboard, and the U.S. has a nice share of fresh fiber. In terms of the Chinese quality of board, it's probably going to go up overall in terms of virgin and fresh fiber capacity, which will be good for the entire system around the globe because they are a major producer of containerboard and corrugated boxes.
I've got a question that I wanted to throw to Bill and and any of the rest of you. Chaz probably has some perspective on this as well, for sure. It was mentioned in Chaz's presentation, this move by CPG companies in particular to shift packaging from plastic-based packaging to recovered or to fiber-based packaging. So my question is, you know, is that going to create is that a meaningful shift? Are we really seeing a meaningful shift there volumetrically? And what's the long-term implication of that from your vantage point?
So it is meaningful. I mean, if you, the reason for Graphic Packaging new mill in Waco, Texas is coated recycled board replacement of plastics. And that business, which had been declining for 35 years, is growing again, primarily because of replacement. So it's meaningful there. A lot of the innovations in paper packaging are coming out of Europe. The Europeans have been working on it a little longer than we have, so we're seeing that come in. And the lag time on choosing packaging might be 2 or 3 years before, if you decide I want to go to a fiber package, by the time you get through all the hurdles, the FDA requirements, regulatory, changing your machinery, can be 2 to 3 years, and we're starting to see things that were planned 2 or 3 years ago coming to the shelves.
Add to that, Chaz?
I think a lot of it depends on consumer acceptance. I think Bill's point is excellent about the board. But you see some projects out there. Carlsberg wants to come up with a paper beer bottle. And it's a fascinating project, but first of all, will consumers accept it? You still have to bridge that gap. There was a tremendous article about it in was it Packaging World, one of those packaging industry magazines, in January, about everything they've done to try to produce this and what they're still working on. And again, the question becomes, what will the consumer say? And I don't think we have that answer in Europe or in that kind of a change yet.
Yeah, fair observation. Early days. Anything else from the audience?
Yeah, this question is for Bill. When you have mixed paper pricing at -4, and you have corrugated dropping like during the last Great Recession, don't you see supply destruction as well, particularly with the mixed paper?
So in mixed paper, you don't see as much supply disruption because the primary source of mixed paper is residential mixed paper, and the MRFs keep cranking it out no matter what the value is. And even in OCC, and I mentioned that when the price used to go down and the supply used to dry up, it doesn't dry up as much anymore. So we stay in the lower quartile of the pricing because it just keeps coming out on the supply, even though the demand is down, and that's what drives prices down.
But isn't the cost of baling, there's a cost that they're losing money.
Yeah. So that's why after the post-China import ban downturn, the MRF system was changing over from a reliance on the material commodity values to processing fees. The processing fees went up quite a bit over the last 5 years, and that's to cover the cost of the baling, the sorting, and the cleaning up, with less reliance on the commodity value. So the MRF systems can get through the downturns. Now, it costs the generating cities more through the downturns, but you don't want to tell the residents, hey, stop recycling because the price is down. That would be a real problem because then you wouldn't get them back. So you don't want to send the wrong message.
Great. Good morning. Great panel, great discussion. So my question as a solutions provider, sometimes I vacillate between, is this more consumer education? Should we just throw it all in one bin and let the technology sort it out? But policy obviously plays an important part here. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and we had a bottle bill, and it was wildly successful. I'm just wondering if in any of our lifetime, if we'll see that bottle bill expand into other parts, or if anybody had any thoughts on the impact of bottle bill states when it comes to recovery for UBC?
From the glass perspective, we love bottle bills. I mean, we get much higher quantity, and we get a much better quality. And typically, when we sit down as an industry, Curt's up there saying, let's go bottle bills, and the MRF industry is, let's not do bottle bills because it takes aluminum out of our system. And kind of our response to that is, let's design a program that works for both. California, MRFs get to claim redemption. And MRF operators in California are very happy with a bottle bill. So there are types of bottle bills that can satisfy the wider group.
So I would say on bottle bills, our CEO made a little bit of news at the end of December when he, in his Senate testimony, said that the plastics industry would be open to new bottle bills if crafted correctly. I think that we recognize that the data is there, that in locations where the return deposit schemes exist, the recycling of those materials are higher. But you're right, like there is an issue of stranded assets. There's an issue of the fact that, for many of people, this is taking the corners off of the birthday cake, and then trying to have to sell the rest of it. And so trying to think about how we put those together is really, really important. But it is something that I think that we're going to start seeing more and more. It's great for glass. It's actually great for PET bottles as well, because it's a very clean supply for those companies. So I think that everybody can win with a bottle bill, but they don't always win.
Hi, good morning. Kate Vasquez with RRT. Several of you mentioned recycling culture, and probably like a lot of you, I talk to so many people, both in consulting work and in personal life, who have a lack of trust or even mistrustful of the recycling systems. And then you also have the people who are almost in tears over glass bottles and putting them on their Buy Nothing group. So I'd really like to hear any of your thoughts on how we can move past this emotional element of recycling. People understand wasting electricity, they understand wasting water, increasingly food, and it's not emotional. How can we just get past that and have a more common sense approach to this as a resource? Because I would really love to embrace that. Thank you.
Anyone going to take that?
Let me ask you a question about your question. You're saying you want to get past, or you want to find emotional reasons to recycle, or?
And save the earth, and yes, that is the outcome, but it's just garbage and resources. Just do
I think that part of the problem is we're Americans and we're in a hurry. It's part of our culture. And we expect when we pass a law that everybody will just follow it, and that's not how human nature works. And one of the problems that's plagued recycling, curbside in particular, over the last decade, 2 decades, has been the lack of consistency in the programs, both in how they collect and in what they collect, and then the changes to it. And I think, frankly, the challenge, because of the nature of our culture and the impatience of American society, is frankly getting some of these programs to slow down, to just concentrate on the same consistent group of materials for a period of year, and I think that over time they will succeed, but it's just not going to happen overnight. And we are an overnight culture.
So I'll give you one story. Way back when I worked for Waste Management, and we gave out our 1 millionth curbside recycling customer bin, and we interviewed that woman for TV, and she said, I can't do a whole lot about air pollution and water pollution. I can't do a whole lot, but I can recycle, and I will recycle.
Yeah, I would just say that it is incredibly important for people to trust the system so that they can participate in the system. We've done consumer perception studies. And for many materials, aluminum and paper and interesting glass, people are actually really happy with their ability to recycle. People want to recycle plastics more, and it's really just a lack of education and understanding for many people. They don't know what they can recycle correctly. They don't know what they are recycling properly. I think that to be able to get to an issue of education and to an emotional place, we must first educate, inform, and let people come to this from a place of knowledge. I would argue in many, many cases, recycling and environmental policy discussions in this country are too emotional. And I would really like for us to return to data and recognize that we should have some values, and those values-driven discussions, but they should be considered with facts and data in mind.
So just to build on that point, and if anybody was at our workshop on yesterday afternoon, greater than 90% of the people in the United States say they're confused about the recycling requirements, and it's like only 5% say we absolutely know what we need to do in terms of recycling. So that's a big number.
Yeah, I mean, I find at home some of the plastics, I I look at them, I try to see if I can actually see the little symbol. Sometimes it's teeny tiny, looking for the numbers, sometimes it's not. But I think there's also, unfortunately, just because of the Frontline documentary and some of the other groups, there's just an utter suspicion of plastic recycling, which I find kind of mind-boggling because there's so many companies that are out there recycling plastics and are doing it very successfully and very profitably. But there's just this extraordinary, and I know you have to deal with this, Patrick, this extraordinary conviction that maybe plastics were invented by Satan on one of his off days. And so we just shouldn't use them. And it's really dumb when you think about all the value that plastic products have brought to us, but it's out there, and it's that emotion just gone crazy. And some of them are just saying they hate plastic so much they just want to kill plastic recycling. Just drag it down, and then if it drags down all the other recycling, frankly, I don't think they care. They're so wrapped up in that mindset.
You know, I see a lot of parallels between the current anti-plastic movement and nuclear energy. When you got names like polyethylene terephthalate, most people say, "Oh my God, what's that? It must be a killer." And that really killed the nuclear energy business, and it really hasn't had any growth. And I think some of the anti-plastic movement is the same kind of fear.
Hello. Like during the discussion, everybody is saying that it looks like 90% of the Americans are confused how to recycle, what to recycle. So this gives us one question, that are we communicating the proper knowledge to the other people, those we are in the recycling industry? It means we are not communicating our instructions correctly to them how to recycle. Even if we go to any place, we don't know in which bin what we have to put. They write trash and recyclables, but they don't write or they don't mention what is recyclable when we are going to throw the trash. Maybe we can put some pictures there that this is the recyclable and this is the trash. And my other thing, comment is for the first panelist. You were talking about the glass contamination, that you asked 85% MRF and facilities, and they said there is no rejects because of the glass contamination. I think that question should have been asked to the paper mills, that what kind of problems they face when they get the material contaminated with the glass. Because for packaging industry, it may not be a big problem because they will bale it along with the glass. But the end user is the paper mills. What problems they feel in their system on the felt belt and when they make the rolls, whether they get holes in it or whether it rips the belt. All those problems, I think we need to look into it. And one more thing, that MRF industries, MRF facilities which are very big, maybe you interviewed very big one which have the sorting system in millions of dollar setup. They can handle the glass contamination, but the small recyclers, those who don't have automatic sorting systems, who still are doing with manually handling this, for those facilities, I think glass is still a big problem. Thank you.
Well, there was a lot there. So, I mean, on contamination, I mean, when we reached out and we asked MRFs about what kind of downgrades and price reductions they had or rejects they had, and the answer was zero. It's not to say there aren't issues, but certainly it wasn't to the extent that was being reported in the newspapers. And you know, when you look at the material that comes into our facilities, I challenge any industry at this table to handle the contamination levels that we handle. And I mean, the amount of contamination that comes into our plant can be 50%. And probably on average it's 25% for three mix material. So 25% of what comes in the door is contamination for us. So we're all interdependent on each other. And it's important, kind of back to the question in the back, I mean, it's important that we're clear on the issues. Like, it drives me nuts when someone says there are no markets for glass. I mean, I had in my blue box a notice dropped off that said there are no markets for glass in this area. I'm like, I could use double the amount I have. So that we're all interdependent on each other, and rather than taking shots at each other, we ought to be working on how we communicate clearly, we measure with data, we communicate, and we try to solve the problems.
So I'll give you my take on the education system over a long period of time. When we first implemented curbside recycling, every program had a strong public education. The towns had recycling coordinators, even recycling education coordinators. So people got information about what to do for about 5+ years when we were in it. But then the next 10 or 15 years, you didn't hear anything. Budget cutbacks at cities, the recycling coordinators at cities were gone, the recycling education is gone. The good news is in the last 5 years, we're going the other way now, that there's EPA money for standardization, the recycling partnership, the other advocacy groups are working on better education. And you see from Waste Management's reduction in residue, there's now an emphasis on putting money into the processing fees for education. And the MRF guys are the ones that really have to deal with it. And also there's relationship pricing now. If you bring me less contaminants, you will pay a lower processing fee. And that will encourage cities to beef up the education and getting the right thing in the bin.
You know, one of the things that I wish would happen for my industry is that cities would dig down and understand what contamination MRFs are sending out. Because my pricing goes up and down monthly depending on the amount of contamination in it. And in the wintertime, lots of snow, MRFs don't typically run very well. I get a lot more contamination. The price goes down. And cities, to a large extent, are oblivious of that. They don't understand it. And if there was a report that went back to them every month that said, here's our price, and here's the contamination in it, now all of a sudden cities we'd all be directionally aligned to figure out how we improve the quality of the material that goes into a MRF, the quality of a material that goes out of a MRF, because both of those dictate price.
I'd add one thing. A lot of this is going to be technology in the MRF. You know, MRF's figured out if you separate out the glass immediately, it's going to have much less impact if it's not mixed with everything. And I've seen that at MRFs. You've got a couple of vendors here on the floor. I know AMP is here and Everest, and there's a number of others who've got some amazing equipment, because you're never going to educate people to do it perfect. But we're human beings. So that you just have to keep, and the changes in technology over the last even 5 years have been stunning. Pre-COVID, in December of 2019, I was in Winnipeg, Canada. At the time, it was the most advanced MRF in North America. It had just opened. It was also below zero when I was in the MRF, but hey, it was Winnipeg in December. And I remember going through the MRF, and the guy was saying, you know, I'm going to have all new equipment within 5 years because of the changes he's seen in the technology. And he was already just pointing out things that would make the robotic sorters work better, at least in his feed and in his line. So there's just tremendous breakthroughs there, and there will be more.
There's so much technology now. I do think the community education is a huge issue, and the inconsistency that the industry has had in that regard has created an enormous amount of confusion, which invariably also creates mistrust, because people feel like they don't know, right? But technology is a big part of the solution, and if you look now at some of the work being done at the front end of MRFs to try to split that stream up front to get the small, you know, why run glass all the way through the system, right? If you could get it out up front, makes everything better all the way through. And so there's a lot happening in the technology space. I do actually believe that Bill mentioned this earlier, this move to processing fees. Like anything, nothing is a panacea, but by having processing fees, you create a dynamic through which operators can have a revenue stream they can project, which allows them to make capital deployment decisions much more readily and much more consistently, so they invest in that new technology that allows these things to happen much more effectively. And so, as much as we are an industry with challenges, we are also an industry that I think is doing many, many great things. But you're dealing with, a very difficult material stream, and that is a fact on the front end of it. So I think with that, we're pretty much at I don't know if any of y'all have any closing thoughts you wanted to share. If we've got one more question, yep, we're happy to take it. Great.
Thank you. So barring technological advancement that brings everything to 100% recycling, like that's the ideal, right? But we're going to acknowledge that unlikely. A question to my plastics friends: how are you preventing bioaccumulation due to microplastics? There's microplastics showing up in human breast milk. Like, it's a huge human health and the environment concern right now. And saying that we're encouraging plastics still, it kind of has a complicated message with all that's happening in the ocean. How would you address that?
That's Patrick.
Yeah, so I think that what I would say is the full answer is so much longer than we have time for today. It's something that's incredibly important, understanding the impacts, figuring out all of the issues related to microplastics, or a broader discussion that we talk about, which now is environmental justice. And so thinking about research and data and really trying to figure out what are the actual issues, what's the actual real data and great science that's out there, and then the next step from that is a technology solution. I think I hear your skepticism about technology, but technology is what got us into this, and so technology is going to be what gets us out.
With that, we've got one more in the back. We'll squeeze it in here. He'll bring you a mic right quick here.
The question goes to SMI, a company that I know for years, and I respect big time what you guys been doing on the environmental and the recycling world. So here I go. You guys been talking about technology. The first question is, you mentioned that if you're lucky, 50 or 60% of what you're getting is contaminated. My first question will be, we've been increasing big time in technology with optical sorters, artificial intelligence, everything else. I have not witnessed yet, with the 30 years that I've been working in this industry, a huge increase in technology on the recycling world from the recycling centers. So that will be my first question. My second question, if you can say that to us, is what are you guys doing with that 50% contamination that you guys are getting, that most of that is fiber? Are you having a second use for that, or that's going to landfill? That's the two questions that I have for SMI.
Yeah, I actually think that we're doing a lot on technology. So we use lots of optical sorters. We're taking material that's up to 50% contamination. I'd said on average we're probably around 25%. And we're taking that material, and we're going down to 0.15% organics. So we're doing a pretty good job of separating. I think if I had to step back in time and you know, when we came up with our matrix that we came up with, I would have done it a little bit different than how we've done it. I would have made our price, and then it would have been like some of the other industries, a deduct for quality. And so people could see that glass has a positive value, and it's the contamination that's really driving down the price. But we're using optical sorters. We've tried them from all over the world. I think we've refined the type of sorters we like. We've defined in what sequence they should be in, and kind of maybe validation to the technology that we employ is our customers want to go from the 30% to the 50%. And obviously, the higher amount of recycled content you have, the more critical any contamination is in the feedstock that the glass container industry or the fiberglass industry would use. So I think we do a lot with technology. On the second half of that question, what do we do with the residue? Not much. We're trying to develop it. We're trying to develop technology right now to address some of the plastic that's in our residue because of the supply problem we have in the plastic industry. I think we're to the point now that we feel pretty comfortable. We have the glass side of this secure, the quality, and now's the time for us to kind of look at how we clean up the residue, which is a big challenge.
The part that and it was probably confusing on my question, I was not talking about the technology that you guys using, which is proven and is working with all the optical sorters. Is more at the recycling centers, at the MRF. That is the technology that I'm saying that we've been using kind of the same machines out there for years, and I've seen a much evolve with plastics and aluminum and metal than what I'm being witnessed with the glass. Not at your site.
Yeah, okay.
At our site.
I get it. And I tell you the technology exists. In newer MRFs today, like Waste Management's facility in Chicago, it's the best in the nation. And so there's technology out there. It's just the willingness to deploy it and spend the money on it. And I know at least from several of the major companies that they are investing and they're planning to use that type of technology to increase the quality of the glass coming out. And by doing that, the price improves. The payback is there.
With that, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this morning's session. Thank all of our panelists for participating. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.